Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Bunny Cakes, and welcome to my channel if you're new here. Um, so today I am going to be talking about a book called Shadow Spell. It is the second book in the O'Dwyer Cousins trilogy by Nora Roberts. It is set in Ireland, and I started reading this book as part of the Stay Home Reading Rush, and I didn't finish it because I got distracted by another book. Um, but it is kind of fantasy romance, um, and it was a good book. There, I enjoyed the story, and I read the sequel because I read the original one a year or so ago. Well, not the original one, the first one. And I really liked the characters and the story. The O'Dwyer cousins are witches, and they descend from a long line of witches. Um, their ancestor was called the Dark Witch, and that's the name of the first book in the series. And she gave up her life trying to defeat this really bad male witch that was obsessed with her. And because she tried to kill him, he vowed to kill all of her progeny. Um, and he has tried for years and years and years, and it finally gets to the present set. So Sorsha is the name of the original Dark Witch. She gives her powers to her three children, and so from then on there are three children in the family um, that are blessed with the powers of the Dark Witch, and they are a trio. It's kind of like the Charmed ones from Charmed, is very much what it made me feel like. And in this book, there were a couple of things where they used, at least one point, where they used the power of three phrase, and it really harkened back to that. And very, it's set in not present day now, but it was present day when the books came out. The last one came out in 2014. Um, and there are, for the most part, it's timeless, but there are bits where they reference like the singer Adele, and so you know really what time frame you're looking at. Um, and so the first book focused more on the youngest witch, Iona. The second book focuses on Connor, her cousin, and his romance with the friend of a friend of the family, um, Mira. And I'm thinking that since the first one focused on Iona and the second one focused on Connor, that the third one will focus more on Branna, the Connor's sister. Um, and at least that's my hope because it would make sense. Um, this one, they in at the end of the last one, they had tried to defeat um the bad guy, and I can't pronounce his name, so that's why I'm not saying it. It's an Irish name, and there are a lot of letters that don't appear to be where they're supposed to be, um, at least to my American English eyeball. Um, it's like cabin or something like that, but there's a G in there and an H, and I don't know how to say it, so I just don't. He's the bad guy. Um, they had tried to defeat him and they came really close, but he also came really close to killing them. And so this story is the lead up to another attack on him. He's attacking them, and they're gearing up to try to defeat him one more time. And for the most part the story's good. It's slow and it's not. Like, there's a lot of detail about their lives and the relationships and the build up for the relationship between uh Mira and Connor, and like that's great. The end of it though, where we're leading up to the actual final battle, they do a it's it feels a bit rushed because there was so much energy put into the lead up, and then like on the final couple of days like a whole bunch of stuff happens. And I mean that to an extent that's natural, but it's hard to try to describe it without without spoilers, but there are a couple of things that happen that I wish had been described more, and I wish there had been more description uh and stuff between two of the big events that happen towards the end. They both happen in literally the same chapter, and it just feels like as she was writing, she was like, "Oh, I have a deadline," and so she crammed it all in there into one last chapter, and so I didn't like that. There's also some times where the writing is kind of clunky. Um, so there's this one line, and I'm trying to remember. I meant to write it down so I could talk about it in the video. One of the characters says something, and it says, the character says blah 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 blah. Iona smiling, laughing, something or other sat, and it's just, and there are a lot of lines like that where I almost had to read. Actually, not almost. There were several times where I had to go back and read the sentence because the order of the words was weird, and like sometimes it was that the sentence should have maybe been broken up into more than one. Um, so the writing wasn't super great in that, like just, and it was more like the syntax of the writing was not great. The actual story part was well done, and the characters are well developed and everything like that, but the syntax of the writing would get weird sometimes. And I've read other books by this author. The first book didn't do that. So I don't know what it was about this one. It almost felt like she was trying to get more prosy or something like that and make the writing sound more poetic than it needed to be. Um Now this story isn't super deep, of course. It's a romance, and there's some fantasy to it because of the witches and everything. So it's not necessarily as something, it's not my normal genre, at least in part because it does focus so much on the romance. But I mean, it was a good light read. My intent in reading this was because I was also going to read Flowers for Algernon, and I had read a really heavy book before it, so um I wanted that lightness in my reading so that it didn't send me into a dark mood, because I read The Handmaid's Tale right before it, and right after I was planning to read Flowers for Algernon, and because of everything that's happening in the world, I wanted to uh, kind of add it as a fluff piece and some self-care. I mean, reading both of the other two books is self-care as well, but I wanted a fluff piece in there to lighten my mood in my reading a little bit. And I do that even when I'm reading horror. I won't always read two horror novels back to back, especially like really long, like Stephen King type horror novels that are like a couple of thousand pages. Um, because if I stay in that dark place too long, it can go it can make me feel more dark and depressed and everything, and I want to avoid that. Um and this story very much did that for me. I'm looking forward to reading the third one. It's already out. The last one came out in 2014. I just have to wait to I have it on my holds list with my library for the ebook. And um this isn't a series that I enjoy so much that I'm going to seek it out. I'm willing to wait for it, but I want to read the rest of the story. I'm hoping that they finally defeat the bad guy. Um and I also want to know more about Branna's character. And there's a lot of time jumping in this one as well, because at least Connor, he goes back in time through dreams, and I was hoping that that would play more of a part, and I think maybe it will in the next part of the series, because I think it's very, very important. And it seemed like it would be more important in this book, but they kind of skipped over it and glossed over it. And one other thing that I didn't super like about this book is that it felt like there were more loose ends left in this one. So it was written where you definitely know that there has to be another part of the series, because um like they talk so much about Iona and Boyle's wedding and the planning for it, but like it's talked about very much in a way where it's like, well, we need to plan this wedding because it's next spring. And they do to an extent get some planning done, but like that's not taken care of in this book. That storyline isn't wrapped up, and it it's not wrapped up even like in part in a way that feels like, okay, I can wait till the next book. It almost feels like they dealt with it to a certain point and then it got forgotten about. And I can see how that could happen in the course of the events that are going on too, but I just wish there had been a little more wrap up to that. Um but still, I think I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, because there were some good points, but there were those drawbacks, like the weird clunky writing and the loose ends that weren't, they didn't feel wrapped up enough that they were addressed, like not to a point of finality because they didn't need to be final, but it felt more like we forgot to finish this part of the story. Um, then it was like, oh, find out next time. Um, but yeah, looking forward to the next one. It's not a bad read. I would recommend it if you need like a fluff piece or if you like that romance fantasy genre. I do occasionally. Mostly I got into it because of the fantasy, and I don't mind the romance part of it being a big focus because it's done well enough. So it's not cheesy romance. I mean, it does get cheesy sometimes, but it's not entirely cheesy romance. The fantasy part of it is written in really well, and the romance and the fantasy work pretty well together. Um, but yeah, I would recommend it if you're into that kind of thing, or if you just need a fluff piece, or if you're looking to just explore outside genres that you're normally used to. I mean, don't start with this one. It's best if you read the first one because it does reference back to the first part of the story a lot. I think you could probably still enjoy it if you don't read the first one, but I would still recommend, because it's a series, read the first book, Dark Witch, then read this one, and then decide if you want to read the next one. And I can't remember what the next one in the series is called at the moment. Um, but it I don't feel like it was a waste of time reading it. I got my escapism, I got my fluff piece, I can move on to my next dark and dreary or true crime or whatever that I want to read. Um, and I feel like it was a good experience reading it. Not my favorite book ever, but not every book is going to be in my top 10 list. That's the point of a top 10 list. um, but yeah, that's all I have for this review. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, click that like button down below. If you like my channel and you'd like to see more content from me and you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. There's a notification bell if you want to be notified of my videos when I post them. And thank you for watching, and I do hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.